Okay, so moving on, I would like to bring on our next speaker, but I think Kyrillos just disappeared from the screen just now. So let me bring Nanda Kishore, who's the Director of Supply Chain and Logistics for Saffron Cabin, to join us. Kyrillos, you're back. Okay, so Nanda, I'll come back to you after. You just disappeared. I was just about to introduce you and you just left the room. Nanda, I'll come back to you after. Sorry for that. Okay, Kyrillos, let me introduce you quickly. You are the supply chain engineer of American company, and you're particularly in charge of the snacks cluster. And go ahead, it's all yours. You can start to share your screen and open your presentation, and then we can listen to you. Thank you. Go ahead.
So actually, it's good morning here. It's in Egypt here. It's 10 a.m. So good evening, everyone. It's a great honor for me to be here today with you, especially discussing a very rich topic such as supply chain optimization. My webinar today has the title of Supply Chain Optimization Between Past and Future. First, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Kyrillos. I'm a supply chain engineer in Americana Foods division in the snacks cluster. I have great experience in supply chain planning. I have been a consultant in optimization software, optimization consultancy company and software provider for optimization projects for many years. So supply chain optimization was the title of my whole career until now. Today's agenda is very, very concise and very simple. I'll be trying to focus on the very origins of the term of optimization as a term. So we'll be starting off with what exactly is optimization and what is supply chain optimization. Then we'll be going back to the very past, to the World War II, to discuss how exactly did this term emerge and why is it so effective and valuable to us today. Then we'll be heading to how to optimize the supply chain generally, and specifically we'll be discussing some of the very trending topics, which is the optimizing the future. It's green optimization, and we'll be finalizing the session with different case studies of different industries of supply chain optimization. So what exactly is optimization? Since the advent of the Industrial Revolution, the world has seen a remarkable growth in the size and complexity of organizations. One problem is still not solved. What is the best for one component frequently is determinant to another. So the components may end up working at cross purposes. A related problem is that as the complexity and specialization in an organization increases, it becomes more and more difficult to allocate the available resources to the various activities in a way that it is most effective to the organization as a whole. So in a very simple way, optimization is the optimal way to do a specific operation. In supply chain, it's an operation related to supply chain. It's as simple as that. The term optimization emerged back on the Second World War, when the war was very fierce and resources became very, very scarce, and perfect allocation, optimal allocation needed to be available. So the one that had the best planning, the best plan, the best logistics plan to distribute its resources to the war locations was going to win the war. So it started right in the military sector. Then after the war, it started moving on to the business sector. Different legendary scientists and researchers discussed this term, but the most interesting actually research was the one delivered by Herbert Simon. He's a Nobel Prize winner in economic sciences because of that specific research in 1978. He discussed that optimization might not be the best option, although it introduces optimal solutions, but the optimal solutions might not be 100% applicable in real life. So if the optimal answer might not be applicable, what's better than an optimal answer? A satisfying answer. So he started introducing the term of satisfization or satisfizing. This term means the optimal and applicable way to do a specific operation. So it's the more logical and the best logical answer or method to do a specific operation. So the term satisfizing, which is the more effective actually term, even more than optimization itself, was introduced in the year 1978. Then we started looking for how to satisfy or how to optimize our supply chains. There are different operations. The chain is huge, a lot of various players, so it's very complex. We can't simply wake up in the morning and optimize our supply chains. So we are going to illustrate this on a very simple supply chain with the traditional 5 key players: the supplier, the manufacturer, distributor, retailer, and the customer. And we were going to be focusing on the main interactions between these players, whether the customer order cycle, the placement, the replenishment cycle, the manufacturing cycle, and procurement cycle. So for sure, we do not have enough time to go in deep of each cycle and talk about each operation within them, but I'll try to cover it all up generally. So what are the steps of satisfying a supply chain? How to optimize our supply chain? So the most important step is the first step, which is detection phase. We all know that the supply chain has different flows, whether it's cash flow or material flow, but actually in the process of optimizing a supply chain, the information flow is the #1 priority, because without detecting our weakness points, we won't be able to start the process of optimization. So first of all, we start detecting our weakness points, and weaknesses might not be the most popular weakness points. There might be ways of doing some specific operations, but it not in a very optimal way that leads to a lot of waste, whether money, time. We'll discuss this in further detail soon. Then we start analyzing this problem and the effect of it on the other operations around it. Then we start building up a mathematical model. It's kind of related to operations research models, but not all cases are that complex. To optimize a problem, we have to assign an objective which will be detected in the first phase, whether we are going to cut a cost or something. Then we start to satisfy our answer. The optimization phase, which is the third phase, will deliver us an optimal mathematical answer. But as we said before, it might not be the optimal or the best answer. It might not be applicable for our company. It might not suit us, or it might not fit into our organization's structure. So then our human factor must interfere, and we start reducing the optimality of the answer until it's now the optimal and applicable answer. So what exactly are the objectives that we should start detecting, or we start setting as our objectives in our mathematical models? What exactly can be causing wastes in our supply chains? Most likely, optimization models or satisfying models are built upon cost reduction. That's our #1 priority, cutting costs. Then it's profit maximization. Now we have already cut our costs, so logically profit will increase. And in some cases, cutting costs is some sort of related to wasted time. It might be a result of a problem in the distribution or something. Then we'll head to the green optimization, or the future optimization trend, which is emissions reduction. So the 4 objectives might be kind of related, kind of leading to each other, but in a sort of another, it's all about priorities. And it's not a rule that the 4 of the objectives can be achieved in one time. So what exactly is the case studies that we're going to apply all these on? Is this process actually real and applicable? Well, we all know the Toyota model. The Toyota company introduced the just-in-time model back on 1938. They focused a lot on cost reduction. They reduced the cost, to be more specific, in the warehousing costs. They gave a lot of priority to the transportation and to the manufacturing time. So sort of they cut it off a lot of time as well. And if we look to this model with a different perspective, with the lesser warehousing, the lesser operations done in the warehouse, they kind of reduce the greenhouse gas emissions emitted from all the operations on their supply chain. So the carbon footprint, it was reduced in some way. But the most effective example was the Japanese airlines. Actually, they are one of the very active companies in this specific trend, the green optimization. They had a lot of trials made within a lot of projects within 2009, 2017, and 2019. The airlines sector has a very big problem that planes burn a lot of fuel within each trip, so the carbon footprint is very, very huge. So airlines must face this problem with a very effective solution, but most likely the green solutions are a costly solution. So Japanese airlines started doing a mathematical model to see what is the optimal amount of green fuel or biofuel to be added to their planes to reduce the amount of emissions. Then they started satisfying the resulted answer. So the resulted percentage of biofuel does not affect the pour point or the cloud point of the fuel, so it does not damage the engine or exceed the break point of their financial transactions. So they reduced a lot of emissions. Thousands of tons of CO2 were saved because of very, very slight changes. One final example that will sum it all up: supply chain optimization opportunities might be located in the smallest of the operations in the supply chain. Last year, I was working a project on another airline. It was an Egyptian airline. It's Egypt Air. We were able to save up to $30,000 in 1 month through editing just the amount of potable water added to the tanks for only one trip between Cairo and Jeddah among all the months. So the slightest or the smallest operations in the supply chain can be the most effective. They can be the key of the wastes, whether in time, cost, or in greenhouse gas emissions. I think that's it. I hope that it was an interesting session, and I can't wait to hear any questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Kyrillos. Again, if you have any questions for Kyrillos, just hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and Kyrillos will come back during the panel discussion at the very end of this event. Okay, thank you, Kyrillos.
Okay,
we'll
thanks a lot.
You later. All right, I'd like all of us to start the panel discussion. So I would like to again invite Nanda, Kyrillos, Peter to switch on their webcam and unmute themselves as well, and then we can start taking questions. So to all the delegates which are listening, you can still ask your questions by clicking on the Q&A button. If you are confused, you can also make use of the chat box on your right side of the screen. So let me start first. I've got a couple of questions that I received also separately, and I would like to start. There was a question asked to Peter during a presentation, and I would like to ask Peter again. The question was, how are you getting the transportation rates I know that you already responded in writing, but I appreciate if you could also, explain to us just right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, how we ensured that we had the right transportation rates given the distances to be covered in the network. What we have done is, or what we typically do, is based on historical transportation rates. We look at what is the ratio between distance and transport cost, where you see a clear pattern that the longer the distance, the less cost you have by travel distance. We create that model, and based on that model, we recalculate the distances to be covered if you make any changes into your physical network, to recalculate what will be the transportation costs in your network. So basically, you use historical rates, you define a model which allows to create a relation between distance covered and increase of transport costs, and you apply that to the new locations, the new distances between the warehouses, factories, customers to serve, etc.
Okay, Han Chen will actually ask a question, made a follow-up question, and ask you which rates database are you using?
So it's a combination of, we used the historical rates of the customer themselves, as well as over the years we have done a lot of network studies. So we have collected from various different customers different rates for different in different regions, different distances, etc. So we consolidate all the information we have from the customer themselves historically, as well as consolidation of information we've collected in other projects. Okay,
and just related to that, Peter, you mentioned solutions. I think you mentioned Any Logistics and Lamasoft. Based on your own experience, do you find those solutions to be adapted or working well in the Asian environment? And this is again a question for Nanda and Sumava and Kerolos as well, if you want to comment on this. What's your experience on those solutions in the Asian context?
So one of the reasons why the company where I worked at back then actually used AnyLogic, which is more a general simulation software, is it allows to make any specific changes given the Asian context. So yes, standard software like Lamasoft and Any Logistics offer you the ability to rather quickly develop a model and create a network. But if you really want to make specific changes given a local or regional situation, then basic simulation software would more allow you to do that. It's a bit a trade-off between how many expertise do you need to actually build the model and make sure that it's correct versus the ease of building a network model.
Okay. Nanda, Sumava, Kerolos, what's your view on solution and technology, working in the Asian context? Do you find those solutions to be efficient here in this environment, which is a bit more complex than the typical US or European market? Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody would like to? Kerolos, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Nanda.
It's all right.
Well, actually, I believe supply chain optimizations depends a lot on technology. As I said before, optimization models are not built manually nowadays. There are specific softwares that are specialized in building the mathematical models. There are other softwares that are specified in simulating the results of these models. So to make sure that this answer is can be applicable, it's not just optimal but not realistic. So I believe yes, technology is a very, very important player, and I think the case studies presented by all the other speakers reflected the very importance of this very, very important factor.
Okay, and Nanda, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I would say, yeah, definitely depends on the kind of product and the kind of distributor and the whole network for the logistics aspect. So the lead time, I think, is very important for us. On top of the optimization with the inventory levels, there should be the combination of transportation cost, inventory level, and overall the ABC analysis, I think, is the key. not every item deserves the same kind of attention. So we wanted to make sure that we take a look at the XYZ ABC parameters, the high runners and high variability, and low runners versus low variability. So that's my opinion.
Okay, Sumava, what's your comment on the use of technology in the Asian context here?
Right, like tools and technologies are enablers, right? So I think tools is absolutely important, but I think the critical part is understanding your baseline and understanding your master data very correctly, because where sometimes we go, it becomes a bit of a garbage in and garbage out. So there's a lot of cleanup and outliers that is required. And once you have that cleanup and you understand and segmentation and all, and then you understand where you want to migrate to, if these two are very logically defined, I think you can slice and cut and dice the data using technology in multiple ways, which will use as a decision support system, right? The other point is we are also exploring in this sphere of network optimization, the role of machine learning and AI, which I believe would come in a massive way, given that when you do network, like we are using LlamaSoft and all, and it is working very well. But as the machine learns themselves, their ability to generate a self-perpetuating optimizing is significantly powerful, as opposed to human tweaking and massaging the outputs, right, to that. So I think that is something that will be evolving, and we are trying to test waters. We are not there, but we are trying to test waters.
Yeah, it seems to be that, especially this year, there's, we've been asking a number of our members about their priority for 2020, and a lot of those companies are trying to working out, how they access, capture, and analyze, and their data, in supply chain before they actually start investing in AI and those new technology. Peter or Nanda or Kyrillos, is this something that you also guys are doing? Are you looking into, machine learning and artificial intelligence to, to help you on the data that you're capturing? Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, so if I personally look at the various companies where I worked and with whom I worked, realistically, yes, I think AI is coming up, gaining more and more interest. At the same time, right, realistic, how our current supply chain is being run, it's still relatively basic in terms of the data being gathered and analytics. And I 100% agree that a lot of the work, especially if I look at the projects we've done on simulation, is spent on ensuring that any data being gathered is actually accurate and correct. So I still think there's still a lot to be gained to get the basics right before advanced analytics and AI is actually going to contribute a lot given the current situation of supply chains in Asia. Okay.
Nanda or Kyrillos, do you have any comment on this?
Actually, yes, I totally agree with Peter. Actually, artificial intelligence is going to change, to do a lot of change in supply chains. But I don't think that we're ready for using such technology on 2020. It's still very costly, and the manpower is not 100% trained, and the mentality of the manpower is not still compatible with this type of technology. But most importantly, our supply chains are not still compatible with this type of technology. So yes, the data gathering is not 100% digitalized. So the data analytics might not be 100% effective. So Mava was right as well, because our supply chains are not very digitalized. So yes, trash in, trash out. So the artificial intelligence, if it does not have effective data entry, so the analytics won't be very effective.
Okay, all right, let's move on to the other questions. There was a question for you, Sumava. What is a joint point of sales availability? How do you do that?
So this is a great question, and this is the most difficult part, all right, moving from an inside out to an outside in supply chain. So I think what we have done, have done some pilot. So where we have a single step distribution process, and what I meant by single step distribution process is that instead of weed outing the products from Goodyear locations to a distributor, to a wholesale, and then to a retail, and then to a consumer, there is a single step where we ship from our regional distribution center to a retailer, and a consumer steps into a retailer to buy the product, right? And those retail channel is controlled by Goodyear, right? So we are doing that experiment in Australia, where it is company-owned retail outlets, and there we have set up some systems and processes, whether it is replenishment logic and understanding when a consumer enters into a store and the orders are logged in, at that point in time when the consumer says purchasing intent is there and what stocks is available, because usually a retailer will never let a consumer away from the store, so he's going to either trade up or trade down. So we have used a governance process in understanding that when a consumer enters, are the stock available at that point? So the store's manager is sending a report at the end of every month, at the end of every day, that this is what the intent of buying in this stock and what is a true opportunity loss. Now, if he's trading down, it is a margin loss for us, but he's trading up, is good, or is a trials available. So it is a pilot being launched in company-owned retail stores, and we are extending that pilot with a couple of aligned distributors in China, especially in the e-commerce. We are tracking that availability of point of sales. It is a big project, but we are taking some baby steps in this journey.
Okay. Question for all of you, all the speakers. In terms of network modeling, may I know who in supply chain organization is doing this? This is a question from Lillian. She's trying to understand how to put the right resource and ensure the quality of data. So within the supply chain team, who is doing the network modeling? Anybody would like to take this?
Okay, so I can take a shot at that one.
Yeah.
So in our company, at least, you know, for a global supply chain organization for Saffron, we divided into cabin branch. So we are having a strategic look at this network optimization. So it's done by the division level. So we have a team that is dedicated to look at this from a more strategic perspective. So again, it's divided by commodity. So we have to have that kind of level of detail. So by different commodity, we're taking a look at these different optimization processes by specifically focusing on that network. So it's kind of a little one step above. So if you can take a look at it, it will be kind of similar to a network helicopter view. So that way you're not getting down into the details or the day-to-day operational logistical challenges, but you have to really stay a little above the water and maybe even a higher level surface so you can have the broader picture. So that's based on our experience here.
So in case of us, if I may, sorry, go ahead. Somebody else.
Oh, go ahead.
So I was only commenting that in our organizations, this strategic initiatives using a program management approach for agnostic to geographies is led by the Center of Excellence organization of order to delivery. So we have a COE organization in demand, supply, and order to delivery. So order to delivery take a strategic perspective of the network, and they drive this from a RACI perspective with active participation and consultation of the team on the ground, because the thought leadership, best benchmark rates, best class practices is all driven by the COE, but the execution is at the hand when the gate 3 signed off is given back to the countries. But there's a lot of collaboration is there, but led by the Center of Excellence.
Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
So if I look at the companies where we worked with, there's a clear split between either a company decides to indeed set up their own organizational part to build the experience on doing supply network modeling and simulation, or given the size of the company and or the in-house experience, they use an external partner to on a regular basis, can be once a year, to reevaluate the network. So the model itself and the simulation execution is maintained by an external party, but once a year the company uses that external partner to evaluate the network. So I think it's a bit a question of what is the importance and the benefit of understanding the supply network configuration for a company. There are a lot of changes in terms of demand behavior, as well as physical network. If that's the case, you see more companies building up the experience themselves in-house. If not, you see companies making use of external partners to once a year give direction and input on what the direction should be for the network.
Okay, just one more question on the question that came in the chat box. Green optimization was mentioned a few times. Where does it stand in your priority list in 2020? Question for all of you.
Okay, well, I think I mentioned the green optimization part. So yeah, our green optimization is one of the targets, especially in 2020. A lot of global organizations are trying to add this as the number one priority in their agendas, whether the United Nations or the aviation organizations or anything. But until this moment, this very moment, all the green solutions are still very costly, and the technology is not easily applied in the real life. They are not very realistic. Maybe Nanda will be very, very popular with this, but mostly it depends on the amount of greenhouse gas emissions emitted by each different sector. There are a lot of sectors that emits a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, and actually it also depends on the intention to improve. So the industrial sector, specifically the aviation sector specifically, does not have enough progress in decreasing the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So the priority has a lot of variables to be assigned.
All right. Anybody else on green optimization?
Yeah, can I go next?
Yeah.
So this is not coming from the Saffron perspective. As you know, flight shaming is a new big thing after a lot of people are going by board just to make a point. So flight shaming along with Saffron initiative, because we are part of the Paris Climate Agreement from 2015. So we are taking a really closer look at the greenhouse gas emissions, not just in terms of the number of flights or fuel and CO2 emissions during the flight, but also the whole supply chain standpoint. So every kilowatt hour of electricity that we are using is targeted and tracked by the number of kilograms of CO2 that is generated by the location of our plants. And now this year it's, I would say, in the top 3. It's very high on the agenda for Saffron. It's very high to make sure that all the energy that is being consumed comes from biomass or solar or wind energy, as much as renewable energies as possible. And sometimes the grid also is a big target. So it's easy to convert to everything to electricity. But some areas in Asia especially, there has been a huge push to go off the grid, because the grid is driven by the fossil fuels with high greenhouse gas emissions. So that is the situation we are in.
Actually, I have to add one more point. Governments are, especially governments and the European Union, they are adding some sort of sanctions on airlines that have a lot of high ratios of greenhouse gas emissions, and they are providing some sort of support to their national airlines so they can start government financed projects of turning their operations green. So yes, it's considered as one of the top 3 or top 5 priorities in 2020.
Okay, great. So I want to wrap up the event now, because we're running late on the timing. What would be your final tip or recommendation when it comes to supply chain optimization for 2020? What are the things you think people should be looking into for the new year? Just very, very briefly, and then we'll wrap it up. Sumava?
I think the front end thing, as I articulated, is customer, right? So at the end of the day, so are you creating value for the customer in an environment which is getting very commoditized, where the relevance of brand is very little, right? When they are spoiled for choice. So I think the key for supply chain optimization is more of value maximization, while being cognizant of how you lean down by optimizing your working capital and cash. So I think it is more about value creation and maximizing this value while you become very lean at the back end. So that is where the trick is, because customer is a king and customer has the power in an environment like this. So creating that strategy differentiation to me is a winning thing.
All right, Peter.
Yes, so to add on that, I think still it's very interesting to see how much of internal communication could be improved. It's not right. It's in various companies. I've seen it now. I see it in my current organization as well. It's still supply chain is still rather function focused, and in line with the focus on what's really important to the customer. The ability to communicate that internal in your organization and make sure that all functions from sales, from distribution, from operations are aligned on achieving that single goal for the customers. There's still, I think, quite a lot of opportunities by improving internal communication and focus on achieving those goals.
Yeah, great. Nanda?
Yeah, I have one parting comment. So as they say, the famous ones, companies don't compete because supply chains compete. So before, it has always been referred to as supply chain, back office, procurement, just doing something and kind of under the radar. But nowadays, I would say network optimization, cash flow optimization, and being an integral part of the day-to-day customer aspects, all the way from our suppliers to engage all the way to every one of the stakeholders. I think supply chain optimization network benefits are going to be more and more in the front and center of the companies. Also in the news, you see a lot of supply chain back office operations leading to making or breaking the companies and their whole reputations. And I think it's only going to be more and more in terms of flight shaming and greenhouse gas emissions. So if the supply chain is strong, I'm sure the company will be really stronger. Maybe I might sound partial and biased because I have been a career supply chain guy, but that's what we believe in. And I'm sure all of us are going in the same direction.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nandalya. So Kyrillos, your final words of wisdom for 2020.
Well, actually, I believe 2020 is the preparatory phase for very different types of supply chain, very different ways of doing daily operations, supply chain. So we still have the chance to start preparing our infrastructures, starting training our employees for the brand new technologies. We have a lot of technologies introduced. We have the blockchain, we have the IoT, we have the artificial intelligence. So we have to start strengthening our supply chain, because in very few years from now, these traditional supply chains that we are still using will be outdated, and so we need to start to get to the train.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for again sharing your experience and insights at this webinar on supply chain optimization. It was a pleasure to have you and also host that panel discussion. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and the attendees also appreciate your comments and views on the topic. I want to remind again the speakers, I think two of you have done it already, to put your contact details in the chat, so people can, if they have any more questions, they can get in touch with you. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we are recording this session, and this will be made available to you speakers for you to share with your colleagues, but also all the delegates attending today. So just be patient. We'll be sending you the recording in the next 24 to 48 hours. Also, feel free to again, spend some time on our social network, chain.net. And with that, we just wanted to thank you again. Wish you a great year, 2020, which is going to be very interesting for supply chain professionals. Thank you, guys, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.